Hello, everyone, and welcome to Demo Days. It's been a little bit of a break since I last saw you all. It's super nice to see everyone. I've got folks from all over the place, from India, from Canada, from France, Ukraine. I've got bots, I've got people from Mercury. It's super nice to see all of you. In any case, again, welcome to the brand new season of Demo Days. If you've been following along, I'm AJ, product manager over here at GitHub, and we've been primarily focusing on deep dives into specific GitHub product features. But today we're going to switch things up a bit and focus on the fundamentals. And not just a discussion for folks completely new to GitHub, but a way to specifically talk about the major whys and hows of open source software, especially when you want to just get things done. And after today's discussion, we're going to walk deeper into this world together and talk about the best ways we know how to make open source a viable and effective partner and help you ship even more amazing code than you thought possible with your team. So with that, I'm going to introduce my dear teammate, Andrea Griffiths, and our special guest today, Eddie Jaoude. I say special, I see dear teammate, because while Andrea and I have worked together for quite some time, this is the first time we get to work together in public and on the same team. So Andrea, Eddie, if you could take it away, I think everyone is in for a really awesome treat today.
Thank you, AJ. What a warm welcome. I love that. Thank you. And thank you, everyone who's tuning in to watch this very special edition of Demo Days. And special edition, special guest. We are joined today by the one and only Eddie Jaoude. Eddie, thank you for being here. I'm so happy. I've been a fan of yours for a very long time, as I'm sure there's many people in the audience who are also big fans of your work. You're a fantastic mentor, coach. Every time I see your followers interacting, they do it with such just huge respect and thoughtfulness. And I think that all comes from you and your influence and impact on them. So super excited to have Eddie here with us today. Eddie's been a professional developer for over 15 years, and he's done all things open source. He's been a contributor, a participant, a collaborator. He's encouraged others to start their open source journey. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, because if we are going to talk to someone about open source in a professional setting, you're the one. So thank you again for joining us. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Like, it's amazing to be here. We've been geeking out for so many years on Twitter, so it's great to finally geek out with you. Like, I would say in person, but not in person, but like virtually in person, and to geek out with your audience and community. I'm seeing the chat just going like crazy, and it's just amazing that we've got people interested in open source from all around the world. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to hear everyone's questions.
Yay, thank you, Eddie. Awesome. So I have some questions because, like I said, I am also a fan. So I have my own questions, and then we'll grab some questions as well from the audience. So start thinking about what you want to know about Eddie, about open source, about GitHub, and just drop them together. So I read this quote from, I'm going to age myself right now. It's from the Cathedral and the Bazaar. And yeah, that's a very old, not old, it's a very experienced collection of essays. And it has like really one quote that stuck out that said that every good work of open source software starts by scratching a developer's personal itch. And I can attest to that, in that the way I came into this world is because I wanted something that didn't exist, and I wanted to try and figure out how to make it. And I think that is true for many of us who get involved into open source, looking for that collaboration and to learn. So Eddie, can you tell me, like, what was your first thing that you did in the open source world? Like, what was the itch? Was it an itch?
I'm going to show my age as well, so I'm a bit nervous about saying this. And so I got into open source before there was GitHub, before there was Git, and it was a very different landscape. Like, it was really hard to contribute to open source back then, because you had to get access and apply to get access to someone's server, set up SSH keys for different servers, and everyone used a different tool for issue tracking, for reviewing. Like, it was really hard back then. And I'm gonna tell everyone a secret here, so please don't tell anyone. It's between us two only, and the few people that are watching. My first contribution was fixing a typo. Well, actually, if we're gonna be honest here, and we're all friends, my second, third, and probably 10th contribution was fixing a typo. But when GitHub came along and I signed up to GitHub, I think it changed. Like, it really took coding to a social level. It really became social coding. And I did scratch an itch. You're absolutely right. My first project as a maintainer was combining. I'm not going to mention the names of the projects because they're a bit old and out of date at the moment, but it was combining two open source projects, and people were combining them to work together in so many different ways. And I did a project that I combined together in a way that I thought was good. And it wasn't perfect, but I thought it was good, and it's the way I would combine them. And then the community started using it, started finding ways to improve the best way for these projects to work together. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Finally got 100 stars or 200 stars. Even I think Facebook contacted me because of the project and so forth. And just I was like, open source is amazing, and GitHub have really changed the landscape and lowered the barrier for everyone to get involved, which is what I love. I can't wait till we dig deeper into that shortly as well.
Thank you. That is awesome. First of all, a typo is a contribution. I don't care what you say.
It's adding value, right? It's about adding value.
There you go. I mean, that would have been some maintainer tired trying to figure it out, but you did that. And you did it in a way that wasn't nearly as user-friendly as it is now with, GitHub CLI and desktop and .com. So kudos to you. Thank you. I appreciate those very valid contributions. So you scratched the itch, you started to contribute, I want to dare say, fell in love with open source. I definitely fallen in love. I still remain in love with open source and this world, this collaborative participation. The fact that you can work with people from all over the world is so exciting. And you can do that as an individual contributor. You can do it as an enthusiast of a particular programming language or project. But then you can do that as a professional as well, right? And this is what I want to ask you about, because I don't know if many folks really know the concept of what an open source professional is or does. And I would consider you an open source professional in that you use open source in a professional setting. You're a consultant and you do things that involve some open source aspects. So I just wanted to know, what do you think an open source professional is? Do you see yourself? Did I make an assumption? Did you see yourself as an open source professional? And then just kind of take me a little bit through how you use open source code in your day-to-day work.
Okay, I think we've got a few questions in there. So if I go off track, bring me back. So I think there are so many people that are open source professionals without even realizing. And you're right, I would call myself an open source, I suppose, professional. I'm a consultant. I do help companies understand the benefits of open source. And I do this by diving into their current understanding, because different companies are along the journey at different points and they have a different understanding. And, some people think, just a side note, some companies think that by making their project open source, their data is going to be publicly available, things like that. So we try and help them to understand that it's separate. It's not all one. And I'll work together with them to build a strategy that works for them, because some want to go all the way open source and some just want to kind of dip their toe in the water and get an understanding, maybe open source their documentation or their website that people are already able to see. And then they realize the benefits, which we can go into later on. And then I think they get the bug. Everyone eventually gets the bug, I think, and they go, you know what, this open source is awesome. There are so many benefits. Again, we'll dig into those benefits shortly. And I just love doing that. And for me, ever since kind of, GitHub came about and changed the landscape, ever since I started working as a consultant in the open source space, to be honest, I've never worked a day in my life, really. I love what I do, because if I'm working for an open source project on the side or working with my awesome Eddie Hub community, I'm wearing a mascot at the moment, or rabbit. And to me, it's the same. I just feel I'm collaborating with people from all around the world who have different backgrounds, different skills, different experiences, different, just so many different points of view, and I can learn so much for them, and hopefully I can share some of my knowledge with them. And I love that collaboration, that we're all pushing in the same direction to work together. And I just absolutely love that. But there was a second part to your question. I think I might have missed that.
No, I think you got it all, actually. I wanted to know,
Okay.
did you consider yourself an open source professional? And how do you use it in your daily life? And what you share is so important. It's such a great misconception sometimes of industry that if you use open source, someone can just come and take all your code and steal your business idea. But there are so many layers to the things that you can do. And sort of blocks that you include as part of your development pipeline. And it's important to bring attention to that. So thank you so much for sharing. I agree with you. When you have a diverse base of contributors, that's one of my favorite things about open source, the fact that I can interact with folks in Korea and Africa and Russia, like everywhere we have an opportunity to collaborate on a project. So you're working with the best people in the world. And that's really, really unique. So I love that. As an open source professional, as someone who is obviously been part of the open source ecosystem for a long time, I've noticed as part of EdiHub, and hey, shout out to EdiHub, everybody, your community is awesome. These folks obviously have come to you, and you do more than just mentor and coach about open source. You do many other things with this community, but I don't know, why do you think it's important, especially to hone in to encouraging people, welcoming them into open source, welcoming them into exploring the ways that they can use open source as a professional? Why did you hone into that?
I just felt it was my calling, and when I collaborate with other people and I can learn from them, it's just amazing. I mean, because the EdiHub community, we don't focus on code, and that sounds strange. And so let me explain. And we say collaboration first, code second. Because if we think about it, we raise an issue first on a project, and that's a discussion point. We're going to discuss our idea, what changes we're going to make, etc., and so on. And so that's collaboration, that's communication, that's really important. And then one person or two people will go and make those changes, and then they'll raise a pull request. And that pull request is like an issue, but it's got code changes or documentation changes or test changes attached to it. And that, again, is starting the conversation on the changes. So we have an issue that starts a conversation before any changes. And then we have a pull request that effectively starts the conversation on the changes that have been made. And then more changes may happen, more issues might get raised, some more ideas and so on. So it is mostly collaboration and communication first. And, kind of code, documentation and tests and so on, those changes are kind of second. And we can't build projects by ourselves. Well, we can, but there's only so far we can go. There's only so many hours in a day, days in a week. We've all got family, we've got work, we've got so many other commitments that by collaborating on open source, we can really help each other. I see with so many of our community projects in the EdiHub community that I might raise an issue or raise a pull request, and I wake up in the morning and it's already been reviewed by 4 or 5 people, and I'm like, I didn't think about that. That's such a great point of view. And even some people say, I want to get involved, but you've got over 15 years experience, and how can I review your work? And, oh my God, you can review my work because your point of view will add so much value. It will just add so much value because there'll be things that I didn't think of, or I missed, or I just assumed it works. So it works. I kind of moved on. And when someone questions it, I might think, well, actually it works, but can it be improved? Can it be made more clear? I mean, to give a concrete example, many years ago, and I think projects have stopped doing this, a lot of projects said, hey, to contribute or to get started on our project, git clone our project, and then I'll use a Node project as an example, npm install. And so many people were talking about, well, I've cloned the project, step 1, I've done step 2, and it says package JSON not found. And it's like, oh, you got a CD into the directory, but everyone just on the project made the assumption that that's a given, and we shouldn't make assumptions. We should be inclusive and show that step 1, you need to clone it. Step 2, you need to navigate into the directory, and then step 3. So it's like a missing step. So I think people who are new to open source or new to tech can still add so much value because they can go through documentation. Like, even if they can't code yet, they can go through the documentation and say, I think there's something missing here because I've done this and I don't understand it. That's why I love onboarding new people to my projects, be it an open source project for my community, be it a client's project that's open source or even not open source. And of course, I'll be working on them to make it open source. But onboarding new people, I love saying to them, what do you think of this project? What's it about? And what do you think? And they'll be like, oh, aren't you going to give me like an introduction? It's my first day. I'm like, no, because if you can't understand what the project is, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with us and our project. And we can make it better by you asking questions for the next person. So with open source, it can just kind of get better and better every time someone has a look at the project. Like forget making huge feature contributions, just by getting involved and asking a question, they are adding value. And I think that's what software development and open source is about. It's about adding value to the project. Kind of job titles, years experience, to me don't mean anything anymore. I interview for high street banks, I interview government departments in the UK, and for me, experience kind of doesn't really matter. It's like, can you add value to the project and the team? And that's the important thing.
I love that. Thank you. You have a fantastic call-in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I super appreciate that. I am a humongous proponent of get your toes wet. So maybe you're not ready to send that pull request. Well, do some tests. Check out the docs. See if there's steps missing, like you just mentioned. That is so valuable. Sometimes when you're looking at something for a very long time, you kind of tend to put blinders on. And it's so nice to have a fresh of like pair eyes to come in and say, yeah, you say to go there, but that doesn't exist. So what do we do? So that's super unique. And so many advantages to collaborate in this environment. You're augmenting the open source ecosystem. You're making it better for everyone. So thank you for having that call in and like including that in the way that you mentor. That's really, really awesome.
To be honest, I just planted the seed, and the community have just really run with it. I mean, we have things like, we talk about our language to be inclusive. Like we don't allow, hey guys in the chat. People, kind of, we have a bot that checks, or someone else will say, do you mind being more inclusive? You can say, hey folks, hey people. Simple things like that. We kind of usually just kind of, it's like water for ducks back. And I think that's kind of really helped our community grow and become stronger. And I love it when, people help each other. Like, for example, the amount of notifications I get on Twitter and LinkedIn of people saying, hey, Eddie, can you write me a reference? And it's like, I've never spoken to you. I don't know you. How can I write you a reference? Yet when someone in my community, I can see them every day trying to help somebody. And even if they're new to tech, they're trying to help. And I love it how they're collaborating with people. When they say, hey, I'm applying to this job, I actually write to them and say, can I write you a reference? Because you're so amazing that I could write like pages about how you just help people and how you add value to the community and the project. And that's what it's about. And so I just big shout out to the Eddie Hub community. And if anyone wants to join, feel free to join. You'll join and you'll get a super welcoming messages from loads of people in the community who want to encourage you and help you into open source. And even if you have questions about how you can get your company to open source their projects a bit more, everyone's sharing their experience and tips. And people have started so many YouTube channels as well from our community, and I just love it. So sorry to take a sidestep there, but it's not down to me really. It's down to the community. They are just epic.
I love that. Listen up, folks. This is a good opportunity. If you've never contributed or if you're thinking about it, I think it's key to find a friendly community. And this is it. So I love like the Node.js folks and Python folks. They have just fantastic, strong communities that are so friendly to beginners, right? So if you're a bit hesitant about diving in, they'll guide you and help you. And that's awesome. So everyone check out Eddie Hub for sure. Well, so beyond the independent individual contributions, these things that we're doing that augment the ecosystem for everyone, I want to talk about a little bit about the role of open source in, more of the organizational and company enterprise space. I mean, I would dare say that most of the top quartile, maybe companies in the world, those verticals really take off when they start contributing to open source versus just being consumers, because you're also helping solve the problems and make the open source project better. So it's such a unique contrast when you get paid to do this, but then you're also a community, contributor, and you love what you do. And then, hello, if you can get paid to do it, that's even better. But I wanted to just hear a bit about your experience with companies, hear about how you have helped them understand what the consumption of open source, how to create sustainable relationships. Did you ever encourage companies to actually be contributors and not just consumers? So just a bit about the relationship that you had there, if you could.
Perfect question. I love that. It's great to look at the other point of view as well. Absolutely. So I encourage all my clients to open source their projects, because I really believe they've all got something that they could open source, and the benefit to them is massive. And they don't really quite understand, as I briefly mentioned before. They think their data is part of their code base, and it's not. And they can benefit so much. One, because the quality of the project will massively increase just by open sourcing the project, even if it's documentation, if it's the front end, back end, full stack, doesn't matter. It will improve massively, because the people that they're paying, their employees to work on the project, will automatically just pay more attention to the detail, because they will think, well, I'm putting this out there, my peers are going to see it, a future employer, future colleagues. They'll be a bit more kind of proud of their work, and it's not going to take any more effort. They'll just pay that little bit more attention to it, so the quality straight away goes up. So when you go for code review within a team, when it's proprietary, you'll see a lot of when it's closed source, you'll see a lot of kind of the format is not consistent with formatting or something like this. Whereas when you make that project open source as a company, people will make sure it's consistent, because they don't want to get all these comments on their pull request. And it's not about not having comments on the pull request. It's about having the more valuable comments. So I think from what I've seen in my experience with, clients, like I said, big companies down to, startups, that after a while you kind of get comment fatigue. And if you first notice the small things and you mention those, and after a while you think, okay, I've put 10 comments, can't put any more. It doesn't feel right. But then you might be missing out on security improvement, efficiency. So if we can get rid of the kind of the small, I suppose, the small comments, and collaboration is so important, but let's talk about the more valuable stuff. So by making open source, and I've seen this with my clients, even like high street banks in the UK, that as soon as they make it open source, that all those small kind of improvements happen automatically. People are more proud of their work and pay attention to the details. And then the comments are like more focused. You don't just get pull requests that are look good to me, look good to me, look good to me with no comment. People want to add so much value. And so that's great. And then from that, these businesses can get the community getting involved. So if I want to work for company kind of X, a good way for me to get on their radar is to, get involved in their open source project. So therefore, if I do apply, or they might reach out to me, and we'll get back to that in a second, then when my CV or however it works goes to their hiring manager, they'll say, oh, I recognize this name. It's come up in our GitHub repo quite a lot, right? They know our project. They know how we collaborate. We know they're a collaborative person. That just really helps your chances of getting a job there, if that's what people want. But also, so many of my clients, when they say, like, for example, I'll take a government department in the UK. When I first joined them as a contractor, they said, look, we want to build the team. We're struggling to hire people. It's like, well, you have an open source project, right? I said, yes. Yeah. So why don't you go to the contributors, and let's just contact the first like 10 or 20 people on there, and see if any of them, want to get paid for doing what they're doing. And even if they only contribute like kind of once every 3 months, they've got used to the kind of the flow. They can hit the ground running. And yeah, we built a team of like 20 people in a few weeks. This usually takes months. And everyone hit the ground running. Everyone got, half the people felt like they knew each other already, because they'd seen each other on GitHub. They've never actually been on a call and spoken to each other. And I think that was a big eye opener for my client to say, wow, actually we saved money on, hiring costs and recruitment costs. It was a lot more efficient. There wasn't this back and forth and months of interviewing people. Yes, they still interviewed people, but you kind of already knew what they were like. It was more just that kind of last check, just to make sure everything's okay. And it's just easier for everybody, for the candidate, for the employer. So there are so many benefits. I can't actually I struggle to see downside. I think the challenge is getting people, the decision makers, to understand the benefits and to understand the downsides. And some of the downsides, and let's be completely open and transparent here, is you might get a bit more noise on the project, and that gives a little bit of overhead to the people on the project. Issues might get raised that are duplicate. They might have to then close those and then put a comment in and say, I'm closing this because it's a duplicate of another issue. But to be honest, if I'm completely honest here, the community will help with that too. I cannot keep up with my GitHub notifications, and that's a good problem to have. But most of the time when I get to my GitHub notifications, 99% of the time, the community have already put in a comment saying it's a duplicate of this, or they've reviewed the pull request, and I can just kind of, delete the notification and kind of move on. It's been taken care of. And I think companies don't realize that it's a two-way street. rather than just a one-way street. Everyone can benefit, because when people contribute to a project, yes, they're on the radar of the company or the maintainers, but they'll learn so much. They'll learn how to write a better issue, how to write a better pull request, how to do something differently. I can talk about this for ages, and so I've probably gone down a rabbit hole as always, but I hope that helps. But yeah, it's important for companies to realize that the benefits massively outweigh the extra minimal overhead that there is.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. When you have skin in the game, you are going to pay attention, right? You're going to be a bit more dedicated about what you're doing. And I love the bit about the way you review pull requests when videos all look good to me. Click, because you're actually going to pay attention to the code. It's associated with your work. I love to also highlight something that you said that I am a full proponent of this. If you're looking for a job at a specific company, find their open source technology they use. Contribute. Start getting your name out there, because I have seen people hire because of that. It happens. Just find out. And if you're at a company right now and you're wanting to learn some new technology, then find some open source project that your company is using as a dependency and then propose it as work. You're still getting paid, but you're now learning new tech and you're contributing to a project that will make your company even more successful. So there are so many things that can really accelerate the way that businesses work when they adopt open source. So that's really, really cool. I appreciate you really sharing in depth how to and why it's important. Now that we talked a little bit about why it's important for companies to embrace it. Oh, and let us not forget that you definitely can find better developers when you're focusing on open source too, for the reasons you mentioned, right? These people are already doing the work. They've been there. They know how you work. They know your flow. So definitely a good shout to companies who decide to open source their projects, for sure. Now,
and may I add one last thing?
Yes,
so I was going to say
please.
that I think most companies, and what I've noticed with my clients, is a lot of them don't realize that they're actually already consuming open source. So they're already kind of in that world, which I think is so interesting. So many say, oh no, we don't do anything open source. We don't use it. We don't contribute to it. It's like, your entire project is built with open source projects. Have you paid for one license? No, everything is open source. Why not benefit more from that community? And then it kind of does open their eyes a bit. Think, really? Oh, I didn't know that we were already kind of consuming it. Even some of my clients are strict in the banking space. They say, okay, yes, we can use open source and we want to use open source, but we have to check the licenses just to make sure that, we're not liable for anything in the future, et cetera. And that's fine. And that's, again, why it's really important for every open source project, be it from someone who's got a small project to a company who's open sourcing their project, to have an open source license that's really clear so people can use it. And if companies want to check, that's great. It means that, like you said, they've got skin in the game and they're thinking, right, okay, I've got to be fully invested in this. And I'll struggle to find a company that's not using some sort of open source project in some sort of way, because otherwise you'd have to kind of, just open source projects work so well together. I didn't want to kind of, go down the negatives, but, with a lot of proprietary projects, kind of they work in a particular situation and it's been used in a very particular situation, and you haven't had that kind of vast user base to use it and to test it and to prove it and improve it and so on. But yeah, we'll go into more detail later, I'm sure. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, please do. We're just having a conversation here. So I love the just genuine interactions. That's awesome. So I really appreciate what you said, because you're right. A lot of companies don't have that clear understanding of what they're consuming. And now with GitHub and all the security features, there are ways that you can do things safely. And yes, there are companies that depend on open source. I think we're one of them. Git. If there was no Git, I don't think there'll be a GitHub. So it's definitely important to keep that top of mind. And there are projects that even for large companies, they're not positive. Look at Kubernetes. There are so many just different projects that have, even though they started from the brainchild of a large corporation, they become something so positive and just help accelerate progress for everyone. So it's really cool. It's a really cool place to be in. So we talked a bit about your experiences, how you kind of guide folks into, yes, you are consuming. Let me help you find out the licenses are okay. And there's obviously a different approach when you're dealing with an enormous company or a whole sector of the government like you have, and then a smaller project, right? And so I feel like for smaller projects, we're always dependent on the community largely. The maintainers are doing the work for free, or maybe they have a GitHub sponsors. Shout out now, corporations can sponsor open source projects, or Eddie also is unsponsored, so sponsor Eddie. But for the most part, smaller projects sort of depend on that individual generosity, on the people who are passionate about, or maybe it's something that they want to use and they feel like it could improve the way they work too. So what do you think drives this? And like a little bit beyond the, yes, I do it because I want to learn, like how can we continue to maintain these sustainable, smaller open source projects in a way that, helps them grow, helps them be part of the community, have an active, vibrant ecosystem, in the face that we have all these large back company projects. I think there is space for all size projects in the open source world. But I don't know, I wanted to know a bit about your experience, or what do you think we can do to encourage smaller projects? So thinking a little bit apart from, this like Elastic and like the big enterprise projects.
I think that's a great question, and I love this question because I think the beauty of open source is it levels the playing field. There's no kind of barrier to entry. If some young kid in their bedroom wants to open source a project and start it, and it could be the next massive project that underpins so many, they can do that. There's no cost investment. GitHub's free, and so I really, really love that. It eliminates that kind of David and Goliath scenario. And I think that's just so important. It's inclusive. Open source is inclusive. And so if people want to, contribute to a bigger, faster paced project, they can. If people want to contribute to a smaller project, they can. And I think there's pros and cons to both. And everyone who gets involved will benefit. Like it's not like there's a limited amount of benefit and then you kind of got to share it between you and all the rest. The more we put in, the more we get out. It's an abundance of benefit, and that's what I love seeing. I know that every day when I get involved in the community or open source and so forth, I know that I will get twice as much out of it than I put in, because I'll meet new people. Like I'll grow my network. I will learn something new, or I'll see a different perspective. I might not do it that way in the future, but now I've got an appreciation for their challenges. They might not have a powerful enough machine to run something or big enough internet. And it just gives us that different perspective. So yeah, I think, it's important that projects are kind of well maintained and make them kind of inclusive, like code of conduct, licensing, have maybe an issue template. Everything gets a reply. So if someone raises an issue or pull request, the maintainer shouldn't just close it. They should write a comment if they are closing it, and they can totally do that. But is it a duplicate? Is it some idea that doesn't want to be done? That's fine, but they should put a comment in. I think that goes for Kubernetes, Elastic, or me with my small project of 100 stars and 50 forks, or whatever it is, or even 0 and 0. It doesn't matter. I think it's important is that we show that we're being collaborative, and that's why I just love open source and what GitHub has done. The project is there to solve a problem. It's not there for any other reason. And if it doesn't solve that problem for someone else, then they might not use it, or they still might use it and still might get involved with it because they like the idea, but it's not something that they would have thought of. There's just so many different points of view, and I think that's what just makes it so exciting. It really, really does.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% that. And beyond whether it's a small project or not, the burden of maintainership is real. And, folks who are so out in the community and helping so much do get burned out. They get tired. And like you said, having the presence, having the template, making it as simple as possible for people to contribute, right? I see projects that are very successful because they have actually like a mentorship path, very much like what you do, Eddie. If you want to, we can pair on that pull request, or start here and let me know what you think. And then, there are projects, I just listened to this podcast not long ago, but you remember the HStop project? It was a Brazilian developer, and he literally muted his notifications on Gmail that included the word HStop because he was working and living life and trying to have a work-life balance. And he created that for himself, got it to the point where he felt like this is good enough for what I need. However, there were many people in the community who loved it, started to want to improve it, and then eventually they just decided, you know what, we're just going to fork it, form a group of maintainers, and now the project keeps growing, thriving. And the original creator was absolutely delighted. The fact that the community now owns it and is growing into things that he didn't have a need for or time, but there is for prosperity for everyone to use. So those open source stories are just so fascinating, and they really show the power of community and collaboration and GitHub 100%. So I love that you share that. When we're thinking about approaching folks and kind of just, let's say I want to sell the idea to my boss that we should open source a part of our code, or we should open source our documentation, which by the way, we've done, or we should, just be a bit more open about certain things. Like, have you got any, I don't know, actionable tips, any things that we can, maybe lean on to influence those decision makers beyond showing the pros and cons? I'm sure you dealt with this before, so it'd be great if you could share like some of what you think would be good tips for that.
Absolutely. The documentation is a great example, because so many companies don't realize that the overhead of not having it open source is massively high. And let me give you an actual concrete example. So there was a mistake in the documentation. It was hadn't been updated with the new version of the proprietary code base. And so when the user of the project had discovered that, they sent in a support ticket, and by the time it went through, got to the developers, they made the changes. And cut a long story short, by the time it got back out to them, and it was involved in our sprint planning meeting, we discussed it. It's literally just kind of almost like that kind of missing step 2 kind of example, like really simple change someone could do in a pull request in literally a few minutes. And the overhead of it going through to the user, having that issue or bug going through to the user, coming back through the cycle of getting, vetted as part of it's going to come into the sprint, discussed it in sprint, poker planning with it, making those changes in the release, being tested, being checked, and then going out. The user, the consumer gets it like 4 weeks later. If you're doing like 2-week sprints, for example, and you are quite agile, most cases it's worse. But let's take a kind of good situation for now. 4 weeks. So the user is missing out on the benefit, and not just single user, right? These are many people. And the overhead for that ticket, I think we calculated, it's kind of like 3 people days just to fix this, one line, because of the way people had to kind of read it, check it, pass it on to the next person, and all the rest. And that is crazy. Whereas if they had open sourced it, rather than sending a support ticket, someone could just send a pull request. It's done. Everyone benefits like immediately. And when I explained this to them, I actually quantified it. We took a concrete example and quantified it and took them through it. It was quite a long meeting because there were lots of questions along the way. And they were like, but why do we, have to think about bringing it into the sprint? And well, someone has to figure out, is it a bug? Is it correct? Rather than looking at what it is, they're trying to understand, like they're trying to decipher someone else's ticket rather than, a line change that's marked as red and marked as green, that it is what it is, right? Trying to explain to someone what the difference is between, I don't know, a sports car and an SUV is harder than just showing someone about what it is, right? You can see it straight away. It just is what it is. And they were like, wow. And so then they made their documentation open source, and that was them stepping in that direction. And then, more and more got open source from that, like libraries they had used between their projects, they made open source, and then it snowballed from there. So I think, companies, don't realize the overhead of not having open source. They think it's more secure, which is completely wrong, because people are more likely to commit private keys and tokens because like, hey, it's a private repo, it's okay. It's like, no, it's not okay. It's not. When people say I'm making my project private because I want to commit some passwords or tokens, it's like, that's no reason to make it private. That's like no reason at all. So I think, the overhead is massive, and open source really reduces that overhead. And I think it takes a while for people to see it. And sometimes you need to pick out an actual example and run through it with the company you work for or the client that it is. And so they can see the benefits. And, if you need to, speak to another department, sometimes that helps, because some companies are so big, they're trying to open source a project and they're going through the struggles, but another department is kind of going through the same struggles, speaking to different people. And I think it's important to speak to other departments and just work together, again, collaborate. It's just kind of, this whole thing is just underpinned by collaboration, like collaborate on trying to get the company to open source a project, the benefits, etc. And once you do one, it just becomes like a lot easier to do 2, 3, and 4. You might not do everything, and that's fine. That's not a problem. But it just seems odd not to open source like documentation in a website that is usually 99.9% of the time public anyway. So it's not like it's private information.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So definitely lean into that when you're trying to sell it to your company or even adopt it. I saw a comment come through, someone that says they do it, they realize it on their own company building because they realize how important it is. I love it that you touched on security because it's so important now. Like developers are owning security more and more. It's shifting left, and yeah, why not you also just be able to stop a lot of these things before they even happen? You can do that better when you're doing it in open source for sure, 100%. Thank you so much for that insight. Is fantastic. I'm gonna ask a question and let's see who knows the answer. But first, I would like to see if there are any questions on the chat or from anyone in the audience for Eddie about the topic or about Eddie Hub or about anything really.
About anything. I'm an open book. Just ask me anything, and I will. Everyone who does know me knows I'm like completely transparent as much as I can be. So anything, just ask. And while everyone's thinking of their question, if I can kind of give another tip, because you mentioned before, which I love, like, mental health and work-life balance, and that's really important. Don't burn out. It is an awful place to be because it's very hard to come back from it. And I think people think open source, right, I need to do 100 hours this weekend. And it's like, okay, there aren't 100 hours at a weekend, but they get the idea. And it's like, no, there's no value in that. It's like going to the gym and go, I'm going to work out for 12 hours today. I'm not going to work out for 6 months. That doesn't work. It's got to be like working out. It's got to be like brushing your teeth, little and often. And if you miss a day because, someone in your family needs more attention, is unwell or whatever it is, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But over the weeks, over the months, the benefit to the open source project, to the community, and to yourself is just huge. So I think companies sometimes think, right, we've got to make all our projects open source in one day. And it's just like, no, it doesn't work like that. Just, pick one of the smaller ones, try it. You'll learn so much from that. And yeah, and even people who want to contribute to projects, just little and often, try and do 15, 30 minutes a day. And if you miss a day, that's also fine. So I think if you aim for like a day or every other day, then you'll at least do it a few times a week, and the benefit over time will be great. I mean, you'll grow your network, and as we said, I don't want to go over them again because there's so many benefits, but I still got questions coming in, so this is awesome.
Yeah, let me read it for you. So for Eddie, what can you say to company owners to persuade them to take the route of open source software and still be able to make money even when open source and everything? That's a brilliant question.
That is a good question. Yeah, I love that. So I got a couple of answers here. So one is, I went to an event before the pandemic and so on, or many years ago actually, and someone said you should really open source your projects because no one is going to steal your company idea, because they have their own kind of silly company ideas and startup ideas and all the rest. And it's so true that I don't know of anyone who's had their project stolen, because everyone's got their own ideas and want to build their own startups, their own projects and so forth. And people might contribute to yours, but they don't seem to have that mentality of wanting to see that. People want you to succeed. It's like when you go to a conference, you don't watch somebody standing up on stage and go, oh, I hope they mess up, I hope they get this all wrong. You don't. You want them to succeed, and you want to benefit from their knowledge and hopefully connect with them afterwards. I think the same goes for our open source projects. We want our open source projects from our friends, our network, or even people we don't know yet to succeed. And so I think, I think that's one thing we got to kind of change the mindset of. And there are so many open source companies that some have been sold for millions or billions, and they seem to be doing okay. And there are loads of examples. I won't mention any names. I'm sure people in the chat will probably mention loads, but I mean, yeah, they're huge. I can think of some. Again, I'm trying to avoid the names to give any advertisement, but some of them have been sold for billions, and they're open source. They did all right, and so I think it's possible, definitely. But if some companies are, super nervous, then it shouldn't stop them. Maybe they can open source. I have known companies to do this. They can open source 90% of the code base, so that maybe the microservices, but not the kind of the crown jewels that join it all together for their platform. Like, for example, Netflix. Okay, I shouldn't mention any names. Damn it, sorry. But they open source a lot of their projects and microservices and libraries and benefits, they're doing okay, I think. And I think last time I checked, they're doing all right. But there are certain things that aren't open source. And so you can do it in different ways, and different companies are comfortable with different levels. I think trying to go full, like all out, kind of scares some companies. So I would definitely recommend starting with documentation and just keep taking steps in that direction. And hopefully, you can get kind of 80% of the company's projects open source that people are working with. The quality of the project will increase, as I mentioned before, but also people who are working on the project will want to do it more. And I've had other companies reach out to me because they've seen the work I've done on their projects or done on other projects, right? It's a social network. Once you see someone's contribution on your project, someone else's, you kind of go down this rabbit hole. You just find out what other projects they're working on, what other organizations they're doing. I think Nick mentioned, one of our awesome mods in the chat mentioned that you can join our GitHub organization for EdiHub. And the great thing about that is people then can discover you from our community and vice versa. Everything's a two-way street. People can discover our community from your profile. So I just think the whole open source, everything in that space it's a two-way street. Everyone benefits.
Absolutely. And we are more interconnected than ever. And it's you definitely make connections on GitHub, the home for all developers, home for open source, with people from everywhere, all walks of life, and they can bring different perspectives to your project. So super important. I love that collaborative aspect of it. That's really great. Let's see, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing. Okay, here we go. When to consider a closed source project ready for open sourcing within a company, when? Oh, this is a great question.
It's a great
when
question.
Are you ready?
Yeah. The day the project is thought about or kind of, conceived, that's when it should really go open source, ideally. And I mean that, I'm not trying to be a purist here or, anything like that. I actually mean that because one, it will be more efficient. Two, it will be more secure. And you may think, how can it be more secure? Well, it can be for two reasons. One, no one will accidentally commit anything to the repo or if they do, they'll go reset that token or something like that because it's on their mind that it's public. Whereas I see a lot of places, unfortunately, they have to get rid of all the history from the years of working on that project because they're not sure if a token's ever been committed. And if it has, was it reset? So by doing it by day one, you are making it more secure. And it's also more secure because you're getting other eyes on it. The people in the team are going to be focusing more on when they review each other's work and what they commit and push up and so forth. So from day one, and if you're doing it at a later date because the project hasn't been open sourced yet, then that is fine. But the benefits of open source, hiring people, higher quality, more efficient, efficiency of project is more efficient because people will start automating things and other people in the community will start automating things for you. GitHub Actions, so GitHub changed the landscape whenever it came out like 10, 12 years ago. GitHub Actions in the last couple of years has again changed continuous integration and continuous deployment massively. It is amazing. And people are automating more and more. And I see so many people contributing to company projects or their friends' projects just with a few lines of YAML config because they think, well, they've got a lint command that people should run locally. They might forget, but they're not running it on GitHub Actions yet. Well, you know what? A few lines of YAML config, I can grab the same command that they run right now. It's the amount of value that adds is phenomenal. And not to plug GitHub too much, I don't want it to be a sales pitch, but okay, come on, GitHub do an awesome job. The GitHub marketplace for GitHub Actions, and a lot of companies actually shy away from that. They think, marketplace, what's the monthly cost going to be, etc. and so on. I think they're all free. I haven't come across anything that isn't free, and they're all open source. So you can even fork it if you want to make some changes for it and customize it. But most actions that you need are already available out there. And literally with copy and pasting some YAML config, you're going to get huge benefits to your project. And again, it helps the quality and efficiency because you get faster feedback rather than, someone reviewing your pull request tomorrow. Actually, let me take a step back. Pandemic aside, pandemic has obviously been awful and terrible, but one of the positive things is it's brought our world closer. And open source was doing that already, but so many companies law firms that aren't tech companies, although they actually are nowadays, every company is a tech company, they weren't taking benefit of that. But I think the pandemic has made people realize that, async working remotely is the future and the way to work. And I love seeing how companies who are now, might not have a code base or anything like that, but they're using kind of GitHub projects boards to kind of manage their workflow. And again, that's them dipping their toe in the water, signing to people and so forth. And so I lost my train of thought, but automating everything async is really important because, you might make a change, make a pull request, you kind of go to bed, someone else is in a different time zone, they can pick it up, can work on it. And someone else then in a different time zone can review it, and it can get merged. You can wake up and it can all be merged in and done. And just the efficiency helps. And I think some companies, some people, I should say, they don't want to touch someone else's pull request. And one thing I have noticed is because of time zones and working asynchronously, if someone makes a pull request and it's really good, like 99% perfect to merge in, but something's inconsistent or it's failed on CI, on GitHub Actions because of a formatting issue or something like that by mistake, then there's no point putting a comment in. Then 12 hours later, that person comes online, fixes the comment, fixes the little formatting, and then your next day, they're taking a bit of an extreme here, but your next day, you think, okay, now it's good merge. It takes 3 days to get merged in. It's actually easier for us not to say, this is my code, I own it. No, we're all here to add value to the project. And so if someone else is reviewing it, it's easier not to make the comment. It's probably easier just to go in, make the change, merge the pull request, done. And, you can put in a comment still and still make the change. Therefore, the person knows for next time. Again, it's about knowledge transfer as well. And I just think it's such a game changer. And when people start noticing the benefits, they start noticing kind of what works for them. And most of the time, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of things will work for every company, but then there's like 20% that people might not do or might do, a bit like Agile, right? They've got all these Agile companies that everyone doesn't do everything to the letter. They do mostly the same, but then they tweak it to work for them. And so I can't remember the question, but
no, you 100% correct about, like when you should adopt, when it's the time for a company to be ready. And to tie that together with the last question, I think that definitely the future of businesses is very correlated with their open source adoption. That is 100% what's going to happen. And I love what you said about all companies being software companies, because they are. It doesn't matter what you do. You are a software company, especially now in this world today, more than ever. So those were really, really great questions. Thank you to our audience. Let's see, is there any other questions? Here we are from Anna. Do you think security could be compromised with open source project? Wow, this is a really good question. And actually, in following series, we're gonna go in depth on open source and security. But Eddie, would you like to just reply to that high level? That'd be great.
Sure. Well, GitHub has, so many tools already kind of built in for security, which is super helpful. And there are third parties that you can use to tie in with GitHub Actions, etc., and so on. And so I think a lot of companies will benefit from the different eyes on the project straight away. And like I said, developers or whoever is working, any technical person working on the project will pay more attention to what they're doing. Even their commit messages will improve. Everything will improve. So I think security will get better. And also, I worked for another company and we wanted to use a third-party service to do security. But it was a private project. But by the time we got the sign-off to have like the $20 or $30 per month or whatever it was, months had gone by. So we were losing the security checks from this third-party provider that we wanted, all to get sign-off on like $30. So even I think after like a month, one of us put our credit card in and said, right, we'll just claim it back and all the rest, because we wanted the benefit of the service. But if the project was open source, not only will we have more eyes on it, not only will people pay more attention to their contributions and what they do, but we could use this third-party service for free because it's free for open source projects. So you kind of, it seems crazy. And this company was such a big company that the reason why it took so long, one was because it's a big company, and two, they struggled to sign off $30. They couldn't sign off things that were less than 500. So it was kind of like really, really odd. And on a similar note, I know Andrea mentioned GitHub sponsors. And I know some companies who want to sponsor people, which I think is great. It's such a game changer. But some companies also struggle to pay less than a certain amount. So some people have their tiers like $1, $25 up to $25, etc., and so on. But some companies can't justify the admin cost of that kind of cost. So just bear that in mind. Have that higher tier. If a company wants to give you more money for your great work, let them give you more money for it. I think that's really important. But hopefully it will change. And on that note, and I will cycle back to the security. If you do have like $10 to give to someone in open source, I say this to people who want to kind of sponsor me. Please don't give me the $10. Please just give me the $1 and go give them $900 to somebody else. I think it's important to kind of spread that, because the motivation that I get from receiving $1 or $10 is the same. And I think if you can have 10 people get that motivation from just getting that $1 to that person, I think it's really, really important. So yeah, just like that. But back to security, I think it improves it. It really, really does. And I've even seen projects where they've by mistake kind of made a security, not committed a token, but something wasn't very, very secure. They weren't, hashing the password enough and all the rest. And someone in the community just said, look, I think this is better. Here's a link to an official documentation. You should use this and do this instead. And the library that you're using is actually out of date, or you're not using a library, you're doing it manually. It's not great. It hasn't got the right entropy, etc., and so on. And it's like, oh, wow, let's bring that back in. I think 99% of people don't want to exploit the project. They want to help people. And even if there is someone there who wants to exploit it, there'll be 10 other people, 100 other people for that one person who wants to exploit it, that wants it to succeed and will point it out to you, which I think is really important. But people can't point it out if it's not open source. And companies, again, are struggling to understand that. They think security by obfuscation and then just not being aware of it is secure. And that's not. That is just literally pulling the wool over your eyes and just kind of fingers. It's like driving through, I don't know, a tight road and closing your eyes, looking down and going, I hope it works. It's like, no, have your eyes open. Have the people like on the side of the road, kind of giving you pointers, like go a bit to the left, go a bit to the right, like parking a car. Have people next to you. Like imagine you had your friend next to you when you park in your car. Just, no, I'm going to park the car, but you can't watch. They can help you like navigate back if you haven't got cameras and parking sensors like we do in modern day now. And I think trying to give an example, an analogy, makes companies realize that the benefits of it. And I'm going to use that parking one. I just thought of it, but I'm going to use that, I think, in my future presentations.
That is a perfect analogy, especially for me who cannot parallel park to save my life. So that is a fantastic analogy. Thank you so much. We have a little more time. Maybe we'll take one more question, or maybe two. Is there another question? Maybe folks are thinking about it. While they're thinking about it, I would like to invite all of you to follow our new enterprise handle on Twitter. It's at GitHub ENT. And this is where you're going to start seeing announcements for all the enterprise events, be it demo, training events. So just follow that handle. Of course, follow Eddie on Twitter and all the places so you can keep up with Eddie Hub. And yeah, definitely keep in touch. Let's keep that feedback coming. We definitely listen to your suggestions, your questions. And so it's important for us to be connected. Let's see if there's another question. Here we go. Can open source be monetized? Well, Sahil, you're onto something here. This is a very, very good question.
It is. And I want to give two answers. Well, definitely yes, like 100% yes, it can be. I mean, I do it. And if people want to kind of, see my setup, I do it, and I'm able to, fund lots of geeky setups and tools. Hi, everyone, and so forth. So, yeah, it's absolutely possible. And one way, as we mentioned before, GitHub sponsors, it is the direct way to make money. That's the direct way. And there's, that's the best way, I think, because other services take a big cut. GitHub takes no cut. I just think it's phenomenal. Indirect way is people get to see your work. When clients come to me, or before I was a consultant, when people used to offer me jobs, I didn't go hunting for jobs. I don't go hunting for my clients. They all come to me, and that's all because of my open source work. And yes, now my YouTube channel does help me as well. But even before my YouTube channel, so my YouTube channel is like 2 or 3 years old. My GitHub is from really early on, like many years, and that's how I got offers from big companies to small startups, is because of my GitHub work and my open source work, not my GitHub work, my open source work. And I think people don't realize that, because back in the day, people used to try and give really complex kind of interview questions and all that sorts of thing. But then they'd get like a really good developer on board, for example, or a good tester or good whatever it is, business analyst, project manager, whatever. But they can't collaborate. I think that the great thing about GitHub is it's not just about the changes, it's also about the collaboration. I know when I interview for my clients, as in they're trying to build a team, trying to help them build a team and so forth, I'm doing the interviews for them. I definitely 100% look at everyone's GitHub. but I don't look for what people think I'm looking for. I'm not looking for how amazing is your code today. No, I do look at your code today, but I just want to check it's better than it was 3 months ago, just to show that you're still learning and moving forward. Because, big spoiler alert, tech's moving all the time forward. But the one thing I do look for is how do people collaborate with people? There's nothing worse than having someone who's a great, I don't know, technical person, but they can't collaborate with people. No open source project and no company project is really by one person. You need to have UX, UI, testers, developers, business analysts, a huge list of people. And you need to collaborate with people. So that's really, really important. And again, going back to what I was saying, when I interview people, I can see if someone contributes to open source straight away. I'm not saying contribute code. I didn't say that. I said contributes or gets involved to open source, because they will explain things very differently. And one of the tests, I'm going to give a secret here. One of the tests I do is I ask people to raise an issue on our project. It might not be an official issue. It might be on a bit of paper, or explain it to me. And you can really see the difference, because we'll have a conversation about something. I say, brilliant, you've thought of an idea, an improvement. Can you raise the issue? And the people who don't contribute to open source will say, following our discussion, I think we should do X. It's like, great. In 2 days' time, I want to have forgotten what the discussion is. And there are a load of people here who weren't involved in the discussion, where someone who contributes to open source will quote, part of the discussion, or copy and paste it from Slack or Discord, whatever it is, and say, following our discussion, we should make these changes. But there's context there. There's not this back and forth, like kind of, tennis table trying to understand what's going on. And then you have like 2 pages in this issue of just trying to understand what the issue is about. So it's very different. And companies look for that. Companies want to hire people to help that. And they might even hire you on a contract basis and say, look, can you come in and help us write better issues? I've seen people in the open source community get hired just to help that company make better pull requests and better issues in their private project. And yes, of course, they go in and help and encourage them to make it open source. Of course, like that's a given. And so, yes, indirectly, you definitely can. I think more and more over the last 15, or GitHub hasn't been around 15 years, but however long it's been around for, I've seen it more and more become more of our kind of CV. I know that upsets some people, because they say, look, I haven't got time. I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got a dog, I've got unwell parents. And I agree. To be able to contribute as much as many of us do, it is definitely a privilege to have. But little and often, don't think of it like you have to do loads. I'm going to repeat this again, because I think people automatically rule themselves out and saying, look, I can't benefit from learning from open source, from networking, or to make money from open source because I don't have the time. Just try and make 15 minutes a day, every other day. And over time, that will massively help. And you can even, if someone's got a good project, another way to make money, I've seen people do this, is they can provide support for their project. So some companies use your project. You could have a hosted version as well, that they pay monthly to use the hosted version, and then they pay for support to use it. And yes, at the beginning, I've seen as a company saying, oh, we'll host it ourselves. We don't need support. We'll use documentation. But then when they want to rush really fast, like they've got a deadline. And I've seen this before, actually, in a government department. Actually, can I tell a quick story? Do we have time? I'll keep it short, I promise.
Let's go for it. If folks are still around, I want to listen to this story.
Okay, this is a true story. I was working in a government department, and they said, we want to use this library, but we've got a really, short time, this framework, to really short time to use it. I said, look, this is not in my team's skill. If you want to use it, I think it's a good decision for us to use it. It would help us in the long term. But I think you should get, one of the contributors or maintainers to come and get us up and running in 2 weeks. They'll save us like 2 months of trying to get it right, learning, teething issues. They went, yeah, perfect. If we can save 2 months, then no matter what it costs, then that's fine. And so we reached out, and everyone said, we're kind of busy. And I was like, just throw more money at them. They can take 2 weeks off, hopefully, and help us. And they can get money to invest more into their, personal life or project, whatever they want to do. I know money's not the answer to everything, but, you can kind of sweeten the deal a bit. And so, one of them top 5 contributors said, yep, I can come for 2 weeks. That's all I got. I can't give you a month. I can give you 2 weeks. We're like, great. The 2 weeks from that person who's an expert is going to help us. And I remember going down to reception, and I was copied into some of the emails, but I didn't look up the person. I trusted they were one of the main contributors. I think I looked at some of their collaborations just to see they can communicate with people and so on. And they flew into London from Germany. And for some reason, this is really bad of me, and I'm so upset this happened. This like many years ago. I've learned a lot since then. But when we went down to reception, because top security government department, I was looking for someone older than me, because they just seemed like such an expert that I just assumed they were older. It was a university student who was 19. And I was like, I'm looking for this person. And they were like, oh, it's over here. I'm like, I was just really surprised just seeing someone who was like, so young, and they were just so humble. And I was like, brilliant. And the whole team was shocked, but still happy. I thought, right, great. And this person was at the time was getting paid. I was a contractor, so I was getting paid well, but they were getting paid 4 times what I was getting paid at a fraction of my age and a fraction of my experience. But they were an expert in this library. And more importantly, they over delivered. They finished 3 days early. They said, look, I finished early. I've got my hotel. I'm still here. What can I help you on? Well, we've got this new feature coming up the following month. Can you get started? And in those 3 days, they literally did it. They wrote some documentation. They were amazing. So after that, when we had any tight deadlines, it was just like, look, we've got this piece of work. Can we send it to you? Do it in your own time, whenever you want. We need it in kind of 2 weeks. It's kind of a day's work for you, and so forth. And I can't believe that person was still a student. So I think, your age doesn't matter. Where you're from doesn't matter. Your experience and all those sorts of things doesn't matter. A company just wants something efficient and to add value. And they added so much value. And I think it's important. The years of experience isn't important. Can you add value? Can you help a company? And I think that's, the important takeaway there.
Thank you so much, Eddie. This has been so much fun. I appreciate everyone that participated. Your questions were so thoughtful. Your answers were so thoughtful. I learned a lot from you today. So I very much appreciate it.
Hopefully I didn't talk too much.
Let's quickly see what's happening. I know from our end, I'd like to share that our international global virtual meetups are happening all next week on Tuesday. So if you weren't aware that we do this, this is happening. You can go to meetup.com/GitHub-virtual-meetup. And then you can find the region and the language that you like to engage in. And we have meetups happening in 4 different languages this time around. So there's something for everyone. So definitely check it out. Eddie, do you have anything coming up that you want to share?
I do, but you've just given me one last tip I wanted to share. I just seen one of the comments in the chat. Sorry, everyone,
let's do it.
With the comments in the chat. But you said in different languages, and that's what I love. So you don't have to be a techie to be involved in open source. And to give an example, because of my YouTube channel, I have a full-time video editor, and my video editor is amazing. She's in Ukraine, and so she contributes to our open source projects by translating into Russian. And she's not a coder or a techie, but I feel that everyone's a techie. Everyone's kind of in it. Open source really is for everybody because they can help, improve the documentation, and they can make some translations. I mean, there's just so many ways people can get involved and everyone can benefit. So yes, thank you so much for reminding me about the languages. I think it's just so important to include the people who can translate, and then that includes more people. Like it's this kind of snowball effect. It just keeps getting better and better for everybody and society and the community involved. In terms of things coming up, I do a live stream every Monday and Friday, and we do this kind of Eddie Radio where people can join me on the live stream just with audio only. So you join via our Discord, and Nick, who's in the chat, does an amazing job of bringing people up for a few minutes. They can ask a question, give themselves a shout out. They can help me coding. They can pair with me. But people can also join me on a live stream if they want. Nick, remind me, do we have anything particular coming up? I think, we have stuff coming up all the time. I don't think anything kind of, massive at the moment. Just if people want to get involved in open source and want an inclusive community and a supportive community where everyone is a mentor as well as a mentee. That's one thing we promote. If you're 1 month into your career or 1 month into open source, we have people who have 20 years experience in tech, but they're new to open source. You all can help someone who is kind of where you were a month ago. So
absolutely.
And you'll learn so much by helping other people. I don't know, I find I do by helping other people. I learn so much, and it kind of, you get to see the other side of the table. So your questions and your research just gets better all the time because you see how people are asking questions. You think, well, they haven't given enough information or they're given too much. And so, yeah, definitely join our awesome community. Of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel and we can geek out some more. I'm just loving all this chat. I'm sorry that I can't reply to everybody in the chat. It's going too fast. You're all amazing.
It's hard. Yeah, but they can follow you on Twitter, subscribe to your YouTube channel, and then, you can keep in touch with Eddie. I can attest that he does reply and he definitely geeks out online. So let's do it. Thank you, everyone, so much. Oh, I wanted to ask the question. So let's do this, and this can be the closing. Eddie, you're not allowed to answer because you probably know the answer already.
Okay.
And it's like a little bit of trivia. So I would love for all of you to follow the enterprise Twitter handle, GitHub, at GitHub ENT. And so go ahead and add us with the answer, and then I'm going to take a look and see who did it first and reach out. Maybe there'll be a surprise there for you. So I want to know, can you tell me, anyone in the audience, what do you think the first example of free and open source software? So developed by a company, and it was open source. And I will give you a hint. It was well before both our times, Eddie. well before. So have a think about that. Answer it at GitHub ENT, and then I will be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone who joined. Eddie, thank you. So great to be with you and just learn so much from you. And thank you for everything you do for the community. It's people like you that just make this job so enjoyable. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for this awesome Geek Out session. I look forward to next time on GitHub's channels, or you're welcome to join me on mine, and we can just geek out some more. I think my community would love geeking out with you, and just, yeah, thank you so much. I had so much fun. I'm going to be on a high for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
And if I can leave one kind of action for everyone get involved in open source today. Okay, not today, it's Friday. Tomorrow, get involved, and don't think of it big. Think of it small, like brushing your teeth, little and often. And over time, you're going to benefits are going to be massive. Like even just customizing your GitHub profile. Just you don't even have to make a big customization. Just create that repo that's the same name as your username, and that's it. But now the repo's there for someone else to, go, oh, I know your socials. I can add it to your customized profile. You can review it. Just get started today, and trust me, your life will change. Mine did, and that's because of the amazing people in the community. So thank you to everyone who's watching and supporting us here today.
100%. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you soon. Take care.